Welcome to our study. I was just about to say good morning, but it's not morning everywhere. I'm in Europe, so it's 7:30 in the morning. But of course, there's people elsewhere, including Australia, where it's, I think, 5:30 still, right? So anyway, welcome to our study. And as always, kindly generate the awakened attitude that appreciates the importance of what we're doing here in terms of ultimately establishing all beings at the level of perfect freedom and enlightenment. And god morgen. Velkommen til. So we'll begin with the invoking the wisdom body of Omniscient Jigme Lingpa, the source of love and compassion for all beings, who knows all that is knowable. Emanation of Longchenpa, heir to a treasury of mind thermas, sky-like yogin of the vast expanse of luminosity. Jigme Lingpa, at your feet we pray. So we're presently in the chapter of bodhicitta, and more specifically in the section on the vow of taking the bodhicitta. And that's where we begin. As you probably, some of you might remember, there's an elaborate section in the Way of the Bodhisattva, which is an important part, really. And this is part of the taking of the vow, is also elaborate offerings. And yeah, I'm suddenly remembering, this is because I'm getting old now, but I'm beginning to have memories of the past. I remember when Kangyur Rinpoche gave this, the Bodhisattva vow in Copenhagen, in Alfred Fischer's Gade, in what's called Nyboder. Then I remember him, and I just walked into the ceremony at that point. I remember it was the first time I met Kangyur Rinpoche, and he was in fact sitting describing the offerings that we make as we prepare for receiving the Bodhisattva vow. So offering cleansing waters and clothes. So it says here, what is it? 4 stanzas, right? Let's just see here. Yes, it is. Yeah. They come into a chamber, not contrived by human work, a sweetly scented bathing room, with floor and pillars made of jewels and crystals, corals, pearls, and turquoise arranged in hanging canopies. The Tathagatas, with their sublime bodhisattva children, with perfumed water poured from jewel flasks, are bathed by fair-browed goddesses who vie with one another in their music, dance, and song. Soft-eyed maidens, skilled in gentle massage, dry their forms, anointing them with reverent touch. The vesture of the gods they offer of no common weave, nor of one color only, but of many rainbow hues. Panjali provided with a wishing tree, raiment light and weightless, sheer and soft, imbued with fragrant scents, and bracelets, armlets, earrings, and crowns. So these are the offerings then that we imagine, and I think we'll consult right away Kangyur Rinpoche's commentary in regard to these. It says, then, as a gesture of reverence, there follows the offering of cleansing waters. The Buddhas are visualized as coming to a bathing chamber, built not of ordinary materials produced by the common karma of the world's inhabitants, but of precious substances perfumed with sweet fragrances that fill the air. So this is actually interesting, because what we're talking about here is the phenomena experienced when there's absence of confusion. And that's where then the 5 elements, they manifest not in terms of the ordinary projections that we experience, which are then the solid stuff of our dualistic perception, but rather than the on one hand, we would say, according to the sutras, we would say on the basis of the aspirations and the merit of bodhisattvas, then everything appears, the realm they inhabit appears according to their pure aspirations and phenomena and so forth. And that's then why we would say this is not produced, this bathing chamber is not produced by ordinary materials. In the Vajrayana, we would say that phenomena are not as they appear, the five elements as they appear in their perfection, are the spontaneous presence then, the display of the kayas and wisdoms, where again, the phenomena that we experience, the Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya phenomena, they're not tainted by ordinary karmic phenomena, but are the spontaneous presence then of the innate perfection of the elements. And that's why we would say they exist primordially as perfect. In the sutras, we would say these exist on the basis of the merit and the aspirations of the bodhisattvas, whereas in the tantras, we would say these exist as the spontaneous presence of the innate qualities of essentially Buddha nature, but of what we refer to then as the kayas and wisdoms. So here we encounter then this sublime bathing chamber. The ground is made of crystal and jewels. It is smooth and even, decorated with checkered inlaid like a chessboard. The roof is supported by magnificent pillars, gleaming and bright, and the hall is embellished with every kind of ornament, dazzling canopies of turquoise, corals, and pearls. This also is what you can see reflected when you come into a temple. Very often the decoration, particularly in the Tibetan tradition, but also elsewhere, they reflect this appreciation for pure phenomena, and that's where you would then have, to some extent, this kind of ornamentations. I mean, in the Zen tradition, they don't emphasize this so much. There you have that kind of, well, the Zen aesthetics, but of course, typically in the Tibetan tradition, you know, under the ceilings and so forth, there's a lot of ornamentation taking place, reflecting this what we are seeing described here, but also elsewhere. Also in the Theravadan tradition, you see in some of the temples some beautiful, you could say, decorations. The Buddhas and the multitude of their supreme offspring, the Bodhisattvas, appear and take their place. In order to perform the ceremony, the disciples imagine that offering goddesses emanate from themselves and bathe these supreme beings with 32 kinds of perfumed water poured out from jars and amphoras of lapis lazuli. The goddesses vie with each other, accompanying the bathing ceremony with countless songs of praise, with ravishing dances, and the sweet strains of sweet melody. They are skilled in gentle massage, in softly drying, dressing, and adorning. Now, this also is interesting, possibly more for the modern audience, but we sometimes associate the beings on the spiritual path as being detached from the world, and they certainly are. They're not have any kind of attachment, but as an expression of that, then naturally, you could say every kind of luxury appears, and the Bodhisattvas are very comfortable with that. The implication is not indulgence in. This is not something that is described here to sanctify the clergy's indulgence, but rather it reflects this comfort with sensuality. And this is important. I don't know if any ever read Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose, in which it's about crime in a monastery, which turns out to be the abbot's attempt to suppress anyone reading a commentary a sacred commentary in which laughter is encouraged, because the abbot is convinced that any kind of laughter will bring about the downfall of the moral standards and the discipline. And that's a significant aspect of what we sometimes associate with the spiritual path, is that it is disassociated from and alienated to sensuality. And we might think that the bodhisattvas would be uncomfortable with being massaged and so forth. And that doesn't even occur in the universe here of the offerings that we're making. There's very much the appreciation of the value of sensuality. And this also, interestingly, is reflected in the monasticism, where monks and nuns definitely keep a very strict monastic discipline, but at the same time are not fearful of sensuality. And this I speak from a long time sort of association with monasticism in the Tibetan context, where there's, well, you have it in the Yabyum imagery and so forth, that there's not this alienation and discomfort with sensuality, even though the monks and nuns themselves definitely keep very appropriately, according to the Vinaya, of abstaining from that. But there's not the fear of it. This is very interesting. So sensuality is very much part of the offerings, and not just in the Vajrayana, but also here, as we see in the context of the Bodhisattva vow. Okay, I just thought I'd put that in there, just to, for the benefit of us who've grown up with some very different perspectives. Anyway, then it says, they array the Buddhas in embroidered silks and fragrant substances, and with various unguras. Okay, just I don't have to indulge me here. I'm curious what that is. Okay, ointment. Okay, all right. They massage their bodies respectfully and with perfect concentration. They offer clothes and every kind of adornment. The material of the robes, moreover, is not of one single hue. It shimmers with different colors. Neither is it woven in the ordinary manner. It is the raiment of the gods, as though purchased, or rather self-manifested through the strength of merit. That's what we were talking about before. It is, in other words, the five-hued Panjali cloth, effortlessly supplied with the wish-fulfilling tree. Okay, I looked up Panjali. Actually, I couldn't find it, but there's a cloth called a Patanjali or Patanjali, just like you have the author of the Yoga Sutra, Yoga Sutras. Yes, very fine cloth. As to their form, these materials are worked into 5 kinds of raiment, and for those who have the pure monastic vows, the 3 Dharma robes. Far from being heavy and cumbersome, they are fine and diaphanous, so that the crystal form is discernible. So that the physical form is discernible beneath them. And this also we can see in the portrayal of the Bodhisattva's dress. Moreover, they are soft and very light to the touch. Clothing in the northern continent of Uttarakuru weighs only 1 pala measure. And the footnote here, well, we can have a look, describes how they, according to the different realms, they become lighter and lighter. This was an Indian unit of weight corresponding to approximately 40 grams. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, this is where we come to the description then. So clothing in the northern continent of Uttarakuru weighs only 1 pala measure. Those of the heaven, the 4 kings, only half of 1 such measure, gradually getting lighter according to the elevation of the divine realm. Robes in the heaven enjoying magical creations weigh only a 64th part of a measure, while those of the realm of the pure are so fine as to be impossible to weigh. This is the sort of garment with which the Buddhas are arrayed. They are perfumed with many fragrances and are of many different kinds. appropriate for the manifestation of both the Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya. The goddesses also offer 8 kinds of ornament, all of immense value. Quote, so expensive that one would be embarrassed to mention their name, their price, end of quote. These include bracelets, armlets, earrings, crowns, and so forth, an immeasurable quantity. 27. They pray that, though the mighty sages have forsaken objects of desire, they may accept the gifts of those who thirst for merit, make oblations to the mighty Buddhas and to their close sons, and to the guide of beings in the lower realms, and all the others of the 16 bodhisattvas of this happy age. Make offerings also to the ones who take the guise of householders, Dharmodgata, Saraprarudita, and the Lichavi, Vimalakirti. So again, this is not, again, an expression of the desire for comfort or for the luxury that's described here, but more in order to allow sentient beings to accumulate merit. So that's the point of the exercise, is to allow merit on behalf of those who are receiving the Bodhisattva vow. Again, we would also say that the Sambhogakaya and the Bodhisattvas and their ornaments, they also express the merit of those Bodhisattvas. So as such, it's simply just something that comes spontaneously, that kind of wealth comes spontaneously. But as we extend the gesture of making this offering, this is in order for us to accumulate merit. And then there's also then offerings to all these different bodhisattvas. Probably some of you would be familiar with the last one, Vimalakirti. There's an extraordinary sutra called the Vimalakirti Sutra, formally translated as the Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra, but it was recently translated by 84,000, and Tsongsa Khyentse Rinpoche has been teaching on this. There's a quite extraordinary session of Rinpoche teaching this in Delhi a few years ago. But the Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra is really an extraordinary account of the vast scope of the bodhisattvas. And so it's a very inspiring sutra, and this also speaks about then the unfathomable scope of the bodhisattvas. So yes, okay. And by the way, we would actually say, again unofficially, but we would regard Vimalakirti as a former incarnation of the commentator here, Kangyur Rinpoche. Chimichakpa in Tibetan is seen as a former incarnation of Kangyur Rinpoche, our commentator. So he then says, all these things are offered to the Buddhas, the mightiest among the sages, for they have abandoned even the subtlest habitual clinging to sense objects and have acquired every perfect quality resulting from realization and illumination. The disciples should then pray in such a word as these. For many lifetimes, I have gained no merit, and I need and thirst for it. Although I have no wealth, and although you are far beyond the need for gifts, please accept these imagined offerings of mine, so that I might accumulate some merit. Thus, the disciples should imagine that the whole sky is filled with offerings, and should wish that a perfect accumulation of merit is achieved both for themselves and others. They should pray that all might clothe themselves with a sense of shame and decency, and thus be protected from the torments that are the fruit of wrong behavior. They should pray too that they and others might acquire the perfect ornaments of unfailing memory, intelligence, and concentration, and the major and minor marks of Buddhahood. So this is offered in order that we may be protected from shamelessness and so forth, and also in order for us to perfect necessary ingredients, which are the aspects of prajna, namely what we refer to as dharani or sum, simply the capacity to remember, to engage with study, but also withhold anything that we hear to a great extent. And this is actually something that we come across as an expression of sages, not just of extraordinary sages, but even of people on the path. I remember once Nyoshu Khenchen, which he told about two brothers that came to receive a commentary, and it was an extensive commentary. I can't remember which. But after having received the reading transmission, in which then the Lama who gave it, he simply read it, but to the speed that you could actually understand it. That's not always the case. And then at the end, he said, he's asked them, okay, was that good? And then one of them said, yes, but what were those? There was two places that I for now forget what it was you had said. The Lama was taken aback, sort of going, what? You mean you remember everything except two places? And he said, yes. Then the Lama turned to the other one and said, how about you? Do you have that extent of memory? And the other one answered, that's all right, I remember the whole thing. So he didn't have to ask. But we're talking about, presumably hundreds of pages. Right? So that happens. Kangyur Rinpoche himself was actually known as somebody who had memorized the entire Kangyur, the entire 111 volumes of the Buddha's words. He gave it as a reading transmission 27 times. But nevertheless, that degree of, you would say, memory is inconceivable unless really there is some remarkable degree of, you would say, cultivation of prajna on the basis of the practice of the path. So that's dharani or sum, unfailing memory, intelligence, concentration. So that's what we pray, that the ones that we're offering to and all sentient beings may possess these qualities, as well as also the major and minor marks. Then Kangyur Rinpoche says, in the same way, offerings should be made to Avalokiteshvara and the other 7 close sons of the Buddha, as well as to the 16 bodhisattvas of this fortunate kalpa, to the guide of those in the lower realms, to the loving one, to meaningful to behold, to destroyer of sorrow's gloom, to musk deer, intrepid sky treasure, wisdom ornament, boundless light, moonlight, sustainer of good, radiant net, diamond essence, endless intelligence, manifold courage, and entirely good, and also to the lay bodhisattvas, Damodgata, Saraprarudita, Lichavi, Vimalakirti, and so forth. So I'm thinking these are the 16 bodhisattvas, and these are then not regarded as lay people. Oh, interesting. Whereas the last ones are, like Vimalakirti, he actually lives, he's not an ordained, he's a layman. Okay, 28. With sandalwood, whose fragrant scent goes wafting on the wind, and instantly pervades the universe 3,000-fold, anoint their forms, which overwhelm the lustrous gleam of fine and burnished gold, and are adorned with all the great and lesser marks of Buddhahood, a source of merit inexhaustible. 1,000 universes, each with its own Mount Meru, 4 continents, and celestial realms, are referred to as a 1,000-fold universe. This multiplied by 1,000 constitutes 2,000-fold universes, and this multiplied by 1,000 yet again is a great 3,000-fold universe. Tongsumgi Jikten. This is, yes, what we refer to as a 3,000-fold universe is in fact 1,000 in the 3rd degree, which 1,000 times 1,000 being 10 million, and then that times 1,000. So it's I think we normally would say it's a billionfold universe. It's probably more actually, but anyway, 1,000 times 1,000, 1,000 times 1,000, 1,000 times 1,000. Sorry, yeah, it is billion. 1,000 times 1,000. That's a million, right? Yeah. Okay. And then 1,000 millions. That's a billion. So a billionfold universe, essentially. A billion universes. Just infinite, basically, right? Just beyond anything we could imagine. One imagines that this great concourse of universes, a billion strong, is pervaded with the sense of sandalwood and perfumes wafted on the wind. With that same perfume, one should anoint the bodies of the enlightened ones, the brilliance of whose forms outshines to insignificance the lustrous glow of refined gold, who are adorned with the major and minor marks, and whose bodies are the source of boundless, ever multiplying merit. So these then are the objects of this. These are then these infinite offerings. Yeah. This is quite an interesting exercise, because it takes us out of the ordinary, and yeah, it expands on you'd say operating within ordinary conventional objects. It takes, you could say, the exquisite qualities of ordinary objects to the nth degree, and as such, actually, I guess we could say it's mind-blowing. It extends beyond what we ordinarily, operate with on a more ordinary pedestrian level. This is quite a valuable exercise, this entire practice of offering here. 29. Upon the vast and spacious crystal pavement of impartiality, upon the pistil of the 1,000-petaled lotus flower of love, upon compassion's brilliant shining discs of sun and moon, implore the Buddhas and their retinues, great sympathetic joys, to come and take their seats. So here we have then the reflection of the four boundless. The array of a Buddha field spontaneously manifests solely through a Buddha's prayerful aspiration, joined with the merit of the Bodhisattvas. Accordingly, for a person who has completed the accumulations through training in the four boundless attitudes, and in accordance with what a Buddha in perfect possession of these same attitudes perceives through wisdom, there manifests an immense ground of crystal, the expression of the Buddha's vast impartiality for beings, which knows no discrimination between close and distant ones. Upon this ground, there is a 1,000-petaled lotus in full blossom. Its pistils are expressive of love bedewed with benefit. So that's Maitri or Japa, loving kindness, yeah, love. Upon this, there is a beautiful seat composed of the gleaming sun and moon. The cool light of the moon symbolizes the compassion that soothes the torment of beings, while the brilliance of the sun scatters the darkness of ignorance. The disciples then request the Buddhas and their entourage of bodhisattvas, whose nature is joy, transcending all impure attachment, to take their seats and to remain there for countless ages, and to accept them as disciples. So this is then seating composed of this is then the space there. You could say what is it in the mandalas? We talk about 10, which means the support, the seats really, the place, the location in which the mandala then is seated, and this then here is, these are then these seats, if you like, are reflect. The place and the seats reflect these 4 boundless. Abandoning all loose and careless conduct, then bow down and show your state of mind by clasping to your heart your hands as though they cupped a flower bud, holding them together like a relic case. So that's where we would say, when we have this, what's called the Anjali Mudra, it should be shaped as a lotus, something like this, right? A flower bud. So that's expression of respect. The posture of the body naturally expresses the inner disposition of the mind. Now, this is actually really significant in engaging in anything that has great meaning, particularly then in taking the Bodhisattva vow. The body language is so important. As we know, if you're sort of sitting slouched, or in the way of the Bodhisattva talks about people standing with their hands on their hips, there's an attitude happening, and basically nothing, we can't receive. If we got an attitude, this one, nothing comes in. So that's where the body, even though the mind not initially follow, the moment the body is there, and that's where there's a lot of emphasis in, you could say, cultures that are less alienated from the body. A lot of emphasis in how the body actually appears, and you can see, for example, when lamas are in the presence of their teachers. I remember once seeing Kyabje Dingpa Rinpoche being on the phone with Dujun Rinpoche, and Rinpoche normally would stand tall, about 7 feet, and he was in an apartment in Paris, and he was sitting on a chair that wasn't so high. So he was sitting, and then as he was speaking with Dujun Rinpoche, he sort of like, Rinpoche all of a sudden became incredibly small, and his voice also accordingly became, he had a very deep resonant voice, became very sort of meek and small, and yes sir, yes sir. And that's where that kind of this is not about groveling, but this is about facilitating an attitude of humility in which we can take in. And so that's where, at the moment of receiving something significant, it's no good that we're unconscious about our body. We should be very conscious about the body, and that's where also then there is this expression. Then you can see the Dalai Lama also when he receives people, right? When he, oh, good heart, this gesture, a little bit with the shoulders, a little bit bent forward, basically expressing the inner disposition of, in this case, the necessary appreciation, humility, interest, and so forth. So that's where the posture of the body naturally expresses the inner disposition of the mind. Therefore, putting aside all negligence, the disciples should join their hands at their hearts, a gesture that indicates faith and devotion, or attention, modesty, and a consideration for the feelings of others. The hands, when joined, should have the shape of an opening lotus or a small locket holding a flower bud. So these are gestures that are not just empty gestures, but really significant in terms of just facilitating something that's very important, which is a learning situation in which we can take in. And this is where We of course have it in the modern culture with shaking hands. In recent years, we have the bear hug. And but you go to cultures like in Bhutan, for example, when officials they stand in front of their superiors, they take their Zen and they sort of hold it down in front, and again a little bit with the shoulders bow down, just to express willingness to to communicate. Okay, 31. Or to hear, actually it means, yeah, to hear, right? And this is what we're here, we're receiving the Bodhisattva vow, we're hearing, we're receiving. All the qualities of those who go in bliss, their wisdom and compassion and the rest, are as if concealed. But when to the grove of the devoted mind they come, in faith, not grief, the hair upon one's flesh stands up. So this is where again there is this, you could say, where there's this openness with the hairs that stand on their ends. The Buddha's wisdom is like an eye that sees the ultimate reality of all phenomena. Their compassion is like feet on which they go forth in aid of beings. They progress in bliss upon the blissful path, the vehicle of the Bodhisattvas, and reach the fruit, the bliss of Buddhahood. All the qualities of the Buddha, and indeed all the qualities of the Holy Dharma and of the Noble Sangha, are not manifest to ordinary perception until one has attained one of the sublime grounds. Thus the three jewels seem far away. And yet, as soon as the Buddhas come as invited guests to the garden of one's devoted mind, one is overwhelmed by the qualities of the three jewels, and the skin of one's body rises in goose flesh, not in fear or grief, but in faith and a sense of fervent yearning. So again, here we are talking about this scope of awakening. And again, there's a strong divide between cultures that appreciate the presence of the potential for enlightenment and the cultures that don't. And that's where us in the modern culture who grew up without any notion of awakening, perfect Buddhahood, and so forth, we stand a bit, you could say, poorly equipped in this regard. And cultures in which there is the appreciation of not just the concept of full awakening, but actually also beings that possess qualities of awakening, whether they're on the path or whether they're great realized persons and so forth. In such cultures, there is this appreciation for the qualities of the sublime. And this reflects then the result of the path of awakening. So that's where people in the modern world, we have to make a little bit of an extra effort to actually understand what do we mean with enlightenment, and what are the foundations of enlightenment, reaching into both our rational aspect, but also into our intuitive sensitivity about the conditions that drive confusion and the possibility of eliminating these. And that requires study and practice. Regardless, in this case, we are talking about the result which is then manifest the moment that the great Buddhas, they come. So we can appreciate this in the sense of the visualization or the imagination, or also on the basis of having met ourselves, sublime persons. That is where we then experience this overwhelm, this strong sense of something magnificent. And that's where we then have this experience that is described here in terms of one's body rises in goose flesh. All the little hairs on one's body stand on their ends. Okay. The prayer of 7 branches. Once the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have been reverently invoked, the offering of the 7-branch prayer is made. Okay, let me just say one thing about the 7 branches. And that is, we can essentially say these are the, in Tibetan we say Sakjanggi Rinpa, which means the stages of accumulation and purification. But these also constitute what we in Buddhist culture could understand in terms of what we do. You know, so often the sort of the idea of the path being defined in terms of what do you do, you know? Oh, you're a Buddhist. What do you do as a Buddhist? Sort of thing, you know? And the Buddhist path is actually extraordinary because it's not only about what you do, but it's also a lot about what you don't do in terms of eliminating confusion. So sometimes when you get the question asked, oh, you're a Buddhist, what do you do? It's sort of the wrong question, because the Buddhist path is not necessarily about what you do. Even though it's a valid question, the answer really constitutes that the Buddhist path is about eliminating confusion. But how do you explain that in terms of what you do, right? So that's where the Buddhist path is so much more than doing. It's very much understood to be about eliminating confusion, right? So this we know. But again, there are actions, there are things that we do as Buddhists. And for example, if you go to Buddhist cultures, you know, then what you so often see is a lot of activity around the temples. And we could very often understand the Buddhist path in terms of just from the outside, at least, all these things that people are doing. And the 7 branches, they actually sort of, in there, we actually have a summary of all the activities that you do, let's say around a temple. It actually summarizes the culture of doing. I hope you understand what I'm saying here, and I hope it makes sense, because this is if you want to know what you do as a Buddhist, then we have the 7 branches. They sum it all up. What's called prostration, offering, confession, rejoicing, requesting teachings, requesting not to pass away, and dedication. So these are all things that we do. So that's different, and they are then constitute what we would call then the stages of purification and accumulation. As we know, these are actually essential, that we very often would say, you know, without these and without the blessing of an authentic teacher, in addition to these 2, then to think that one would realize co-emergent wisdom is complete madness. So these are significant. And we see them again and again throughout liturgies, sadhanas, and in the practice of lay people. You know, you go to Bangkok, you go to some of these big temples. This is what people are doing. They're making the prostrations, they're making offerings, and so forth. So, 32, prostration. Like a lovely peacock's daughter dancing, mirrored in a pool in which the full moon bathes herself, with youthful emanated forms in an amazing multitude, as many as the grains of dust, prostrate. Let's see what Kangyur Rinpoche says about this. It's quite an image. So prostration. Omniscient Jigme Lingpa paints a picture of a crystal clear pool. Its immaculate surface reflects the unclouded autumn moon so perfectly that it looks as if it is actually bathing in the water. There on the shore beside the pool, a ravishing peacock is dancing, and the water throws back its image so clearly that it is hard to tell which is the bird and which is the reflection. With the same clarity, one emanates literally thousands of youthful bodies, as many as the grains of dust in the entire world, all so clear that one would lose one's mind trying to distinguish them from one's own form. And thus one makes prostrations with all of them in perfect union of thought, word, and deed. So in terms of a vivid image, we are visualizing this, or thinking to conjure up the notion of a vivid image. We have here the ravishing peacock dance, which is reflected in this crystal clear pool. Peacocks actually dance. I've seen it in sort of dark weather. We say also during thunderstorms they dance, but even in dark weather. I once remember in India seeing peacocks dancing, quite extraordinary. And so there we then, with that degree of vivid image, we then multiply. We then consider that we are infinite forms prostrated. Mm-hmm. In order to complete the branch of generosity, offer actual wealth and unexampled gifts imagined by the mind, clouds of offerings excelled by none, that rival even great Samantabhadra's gifts. Offering. Bodhisattvas give in charity all the material wealth that they possess, and through ridding themselves of the 7 kinds of attachment, generosity and the other paramitas should be practiced in a way that is free from the following faults, namely the 7 types of attachment. This is from Kangyur Rinpoche. 1. Attachment to objects, beginning with material possession and extending to wrong views. 2. Procrastination. 3. Self-satisfaction. 4. Expectation of recompense. 5. Expectation of karmic result. 6. Dormant opposing factors, from avarice to distorted understanding. And 7. Distraction through interest in the Hinayana and belief in the true existence of object, subject, and action. Not exactly sure what is intended here when it says interest in the Hinayana. This could be self-liberation for oneself. The last one being the dualistic notion of subject, object, and action. And all the others are pretty self-explanatory, but these are, of course, significant in terms of the quality of the generosity. So ridding oneself of these 7 kinds of attachment, and by embracing the 4 special qualities. This is actually quite good to be clear on this. The 4 special qualities which define the 6 paramitas are: 1, the fact that the paramitas eliminate all relevant adverse factors. The fact that the paramitas eliminate all relevant adverse factors. Paramita meaning that which takes us beyond, right? 2, they are combined with the wisdom that sees through the false notions of action, agent, and object. And that's what we saw before: subject, object, and action. The notion of I am doing something for some purpose or for somebody. So free from that, the wisdom that sees through these, they fulfill the desires and aspirations of others. And 4, they lead beings to one of the 3 types of enlightenment according to their capacity, i.e., that of the Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. Okay. So with these, ridding oneself of the 7 kinds of attachment, embracing the 4 special qualities, then the Bodhisattvas, they perfectly accomplish the 6 paramitas from generosity onward. In the present context, that of a beginner, it is important to practice generosity by making material offerings, and this should be done in a manner accompanied by 4 special qualities and 3 pure elements. Okay. Yeah. These 3 pure elements mean that the intention is pure because the practice is done in order to cultivate bodhicitta. The substance of offering is pure, since it is untainted by wrongdoing, such as killing, trafficking, or some other sort of evil livelihood. The object of offering is also pure, for it is the 3 jewels themselves. Okay. The practitioner also imagines immense, boundless clouds of offerings, unfathomable and quite beyond anything that could exist on the material plane. As the verses of the Ratnolka Sutra say, flowers everywhere, canopies of flowers, flowers radiating myriads of beams of every kind and color I spread out and offered to the Buddhas and their Bodhisattva children. The single blossom held there here in my hand, and all the myriads that I now imagine. These I offer to a single Buddha, and just as all to him, now all to all the Buddhas, to match the concentration of the holy sage. So Kangyur Rinpoche says, as the root text figuratively says, in making offerings to all the Buddhas, the practitioner competes with the inconceivable offerings emanated by the sublime Bodhisattva Samantabhadra. So again, simply indicating the infinitude of the offerings that we make. 34, confession. The impudence of speech, all evil tendencies and deeds, alarmed by virtue, flee away. Their forms, hid by the thick and gloomy darkness of samsara, in the sunlight of the four strengths, they're confessed and cleansed. And I'd like to highlight how actually Padmakara themselves, I think it's lighting the torch lighting the path to freedom, Mundo commentary by Rinpoche, the Padmakara translators use for confession, they use the term parting. And again, it's interesting how, rather it's significant that sometimes the cultural baggage that we bring to particular terms, for example, confession, might be an impediment for us appreciating the profundity of this practice. Because confession is important, and the Tibetan term shakpa indicates it's just something that we leave it behind. There's an erotic action that that we have engaged in, and there's a danger it could become part of our patterning and so forth. So we set it aside, we part from it. So that's actually a very practical thing that we do, and it's part of our everyday practice. Really, we see that there's something that's not useful, and then we just don't do it. So that's you don't leave the door open if it's cold, and you just say, oh, I left the door open, that was really stupid of me, and then we just close it, right? That's just being intelligent in terms of discerning what's constructive and what's destructive. So that's where simply what's implicit in this practice is that we leave aside practices that are not constructive, they're not helpful. But sometimes these become so, you could say, heavy and part of us that we actually need to make a consolidated effort in terms of this not becoming part of us. And that's where then this practice of shakpa, confession or parting, is an essential practice of that is part of the path. And it's reflected in the practices in the monastic traditions of sojong, the amendment practice that's done twice a month. It's also part of Mundo practice when we do Vajrasattva and so forth. And we particularly engage in this practice of parting on the basis of these four powers, which are the power of the support, the power of regret, the power of vow, and the power of the application. So here then, we're discussing this, it's referred to as confession. So you're going to have to handle that. If you have some issues with the term confession, rest reassured that it's a very helpful and practical, you could say, it's something that's very practical. And it is, however we might think of it, the term confession, it is actually something that we continually engage in one way or another. So the commentary runs, the non-virtuous actions performed due to the outrageous impudence of the faculty of speech. Indeed, all 7 negativities of word and deed, together with all sins and evil propensities committed in the past and which have not yet come to fruition are for the moment held in check by the results of virtue manifesting in this present human existence. So we might very well have engaged in the 7 negativities of word and deed, which is killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. What is it again? Lying, rough speech, divisive speech, and slander, gossip. These, together with also then, what is it again? Avarice and covetousness and wrong view. All of these essentially actions that come from a place of confusion, they lie inevitably. They're part of our storehouse consciousness. They lie there. They're part of our being. They just haven't become manifest yet. Right now, we have this incredible fortune of being reborn as humans. So that's where it's being these, you could say, the unfortunate sort of the seeds of unfortunate experience. They're there, but right now we just don't see them because we have the fortune of being born a human. Right now, there's a particular set of conditions that are present. So these potential disasters, they are held in check. So then it says, it is as if they have been alarmed and chased away, which is a way of saying that in the immediate term, the inescapable result of these evils, namely the torments of the lower realms, has been temporarily suspended. This, however, does not mean that the effects of these evils has been annihilated. On the contrary, their karmic traces are concealed in the alaya, the thick envelope of ignorance that enshrouds ultimate reality and is the root of samsaric existence. Even so, everything that is lurking there may be exposed and purified through confession, fortified with the brilliant sunlight of the 4 strengths. Remorse, and here they come. So these are this is the where we would say negative actions have only one quality, and that is that they can be purified. And again, because they're simply just the products of confused actions, and while they abide in, as it says here in the alaya, they don't constitute any ultimate reality. So they can be purified, and they can effectively then be purified by these 4 strengths. And that's where it then says here, remorse for past evil, firm resolution to abstain from evil in the future, the antidote to exert oneself in virtue, and the support, which is the taking refuge in the 3 jewels and the generation of bodhicitta in their presence. Okay, let's see what the commentary says here. Topshti, Sunchim Betop, Kunduche Betop, Sorchu Betop, Tenkitop, so Paltram. So you have it in the words of my perfect teacher, yeah? So you have the 4 powers, which is the power of regret, the power of application, the power of the vow, and the power of the support. So these 4. So that's essential equipment on the path. These are the essentials for the aspect of purification. Okay, we'll leave it at this because, yeah, we'll stop here today. So I hope that we can finish this. I think it's chapter 8, right? I hope we can finish this before Christmas. So there might be 1 or 2 sessions where I might go a little bit longer. But today I have a session that begins in half an hour. So I'm going to leave it at this. And yeah, so we'll stop here today. I have a little bit of impression that I've been going on about stories just related to myself. I apologize for that. Too much talking about my own sort of memories and things. Thank you for your patience. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. by this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. So, thank you very much. Okay. Just there's some remarks here. Okay. Somebody sent me a link which is regard to visualization in another realm. Okay. Could you send me that link in an email? Because I'm trying to copy it here, but it's not really working. For some reason, it's a little bit, yeah, it doesn't allow copying. But it looks interesting. Sure. So thanks for that. All right. See you next week. De rien.